Hello, Odion. Hello.
Yeah, good morning, section director.
Morning, Odion. Alpha.
Yeah, I did. Very, very good.
Okay. My audio is clear enough.
It's as crystal clear as crystal itself. Very
okay.
well.
Let's check my video.
Yes, sir.
On my video?
Okay. You seem to be the owner of all the beautiful places in Lagos. Okay.
Good man. So I can see that.
yeah, you're probably set up. You're good to go, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right.
Good morning, everybody. You're welcome to today's event. My name is Priscilla Emre, the Programs Chair for SPE Lagos Section. Today, you're welcome on behalf of the SPE Lagos Section 61. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this very special and important event. I say special because it's an opportunity to bring to light topical issues of diversity and inclusion in our industry. Also provides a chance to explore potential solutions to workforce. We welcome in a special way our distinguished guests who have given so free here today. Before we start, please take note of some virtual meeting etiquette. Please go to the other slide, the next slide, thank you. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Two ways to ask questions. You can either raise your hands and you'll be called, or you can post your questions in the chat box. Do not unmute your microphone until you've been asked to do so. Please do not turn on your videos. We will only require our distinguished guests to have their videos on. Ensure that you join from a quiet place so you do not distract the meeting. If you raise your hand, be patient and your question will be attended to. A few safety brief before we begin. Please make sure you're not driving while you're listening to this event. Avoid eating while you're talking so you don't get choked. Do not think because an accident hasn't happened to you, it can't. Carelessness can be very expensive, so please be careful at all times. Remember that COVID-19 is still real, so stay safe and be aware. So before we start, let me explain to you what we should expect. At this event, we will explore sustainable energy in Nigerian context and discuss the role of women in the whole energy transition. We will talk about the constraints that women face in being represented in at top levels across the industry and explore opportunities for women in discuss field experience and how it contributes to career growth for women. These are issues that are very close to my heart, and I'm proud of the stellar panel that we have put together today to shed light on these issues and to chart a course for breaking the bias. This is the beginning of many more to come, and it's my hope that forums like this can, at forums like this or by forums like this, we can take significant steps to shattering the status quo. This forum promises to be very engaging and interactive, so please feel free to post your questions, those burning questions, as the panel session continues. To kickstart the event, please permit me to introduce to you, to explain to you the agenda so you know what to expect at the event. Following this remark, I will introduce the distinguished guests that we have today, and then we'll get right into the panel conversation. The moderator, our ABLE section chair, is going to be moderating that event, after which our section director will take over and give a vote of thanks, and then tell you about the rest of the programs that we have planned as a section. So without further ado, here are the amazing lineup of people that we have. I'm going to be introducing them. We'll start with, Ojo, please go to the next slide. Mr. Debo Fabomi, COO of Zenergy Limited. He's also an executive director at All Data Wireline Services, which is based in. He oversees all of Zenergy's gas business, particularly in flare reduction and elimination strategies, while integrating it with other business areas of the company within the energy value chain. He has over 25 years in the industry, and this has cut across several disciplines and specialties ranging from wireline logging and perforating, formation evaluation, geophysical data acquisition and interpretation, reservoir monitoring, production testing, operations, fast-tracking marginal field development. Throughout his career, he has covered various roles and job functions, including field engineer, operations management, business development, corporate management. Please welcome Mr. Fabomi. Also going to be giving us the opening remark and opening the event for us. Next on our panelist is Ms. Salero Onosode, who is a seasoned business leader with over 30 years of global experience in business management, leadership, and human capital, publicly listed entities and multinationals and emerging growth organizations in the oil and gas sector. She's the founder and chief executive officer of AAO Tasalak Limited, a consultancy firm that's focused on supporting organizations and business leaders to articulate people and organizational capabilities as an integral of their strategic business thrust. She's currently the chairperson of the Nigerian Content Consultative Forum, NCCF Diversity Sectorial Working Group, and she's advocating for increased female participation in the oil and gas sector. Please welcome Mrs. Salero Onosode. Next on our panel is would you on the next slide, please? Engineer Efi Okon, applied in February of 2018. as an executive director and operations director. He started his career with Shell in 1992 as a reservoir engineer and has worked in various capacities, both local and international, during his 26 years career with Shell. Prior to joining Seplat in 2018, he was appointed the Vice President, Cost Leadership and Continuous Improvement for Shell, and as well as the General Manager, Deepwater Production for Shell Nigeria. Previous appointments at Shell also include General Manager for Offshore Assets, Shallow Water and Deep Water, Manager for the North Field, which was the largest or is the largest gas field in the world. He was also the Wells and Reservoir Deputy Vice President for Technical Qatar Shell, with key achievements in delivering the commissioning, startup, and early production phase of 2 mega projects worth approximately 25 billion for Qatar Shell, Pearl GTL and Qatar Gas LNG Train 7 and 8. Please welcome Engineer F. Okon. The next, Olatunji Akinwumi. On the next slide, please. Olatunji Akinwumi is currently the Executive GM, Deepwater Assets for Geosciences and Planning, and is also the Discipline Lead for Geoscientist and Reservoir Technical Disciplines in Total E&P Nigeria Limited. He has over 25 years of international technical and managerial experience in the oil and gas industry, comprising onshore, offshore, as well as deep offshore. Prior to his current portfolio, Engineer Olatunji has held the following listed executive positions. He was a Executive General Manager for Joint Venture, GSR and Asset Management, Total E&P. He was also the General Manager, Geosciences for New Projects, Asia Pacific region, for Total E&P headquarters in Paris, as well as the Reservoir Engineering Manager and Deputy Geosciences Director for Total E&P Congo Point Noir, Congo. Welcome, Engineer Olatunji Akinwumi. And the next on our panel is Ms. Oluwatope Adeyemi. Ms. Oluwatope Adeyemi is an engineer fueled by compassion and satisfaction with the status quo. Upon completing her youth service in 2005, she began her career in Shell. Was initially hired as a reservoir engineer. She was sent offshore for 1 year to gather field experience, during which she was invited to join the drilling engineering team, becoming the first Nigerian female oil engineer in SNEPCO. She then rose to night drilling supervisor in 2010 and drilling supervisor in 2012. As drilling supervisor, she supervised a drilling crew of up to 180 men. And again, the first Nigerian female to do so offshore, and so far the only one. She has supervised operations for Shell in Nigeria and French Guiana. After her time offshore, she moved into the office, using her 8-year core technical experience in a wide range of areas to help improve on the business side through contracting and procurement, business planning, performance management, and government relations. She left Shell in 2018 to take a break for 3 years and is currently working at TP Energy Services Limited as the welcome Ms. Oluwatope Adeyemi. And the last but not the least is our moderator for today's session, our able section chair, Mrs. Fayama Okoli. Mrs. Fayama Okoli is a petroleum engineer with over 17 years of multidisciplinary experience in the industry, working with Schlumberger. She started her career in 2005 as a logging while drilling field engineer. Projects worth millions of dollars for oil and gas operators across several countries in Africa, including land operations, shallow water, and deep water offshore projects. In her current role, delivery manager for Nigeria and West Africa, managing projects, processes, and people for optimum business efficiency. After several years of experience and attaining the height of a general field engineer, Fayama transitioned into the role of a senior petrotechnical expert, providing advanced interpretation services, information evaluation, reservoir engineering, drilling and geomechanics discipline on numerous projects in sub-Saharan region, working for several years in Angola. Several of her projects received World Record Achievement Award within Schlumberger. More recently, she has held the role of Digital Drilling Solutions Business Development Manager, and in this role, she championed the first Schlumberger Delphi drill plant business opportunity in Nigeria for an international oil company, which was further developed into a global deployment across all locations of the company. She also won many new opportunities for real-time drilling services and led delivery of the first Schlumberger Well Construction Summit held in Nigeria in June 2001. Welcome the amazing people that we have lined up for you today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Debo Fabomi to open this event. And Mr. Debo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Priscilla, and thank you for having me here. I will just run through a short deck of slides just to guide the icebreaker for this session, which promises to be very, very intriguing. So, I mean, the topic here is gender diversity and looking at it from a sustainability perspective and focusing more on the Nigerian context. Odion, can you move on to the next slide? Yes. So if you look at this chart, this chart basically plots the Nigerian population, segregated along gender classification as it is. Between 2010 and 2020, that's literally over the last 10 years, you can see the steady growth, amongst the women and the female and the male population. And when you look at it, there's really no departure. And it's interesting to note that it's almost a 50-50 divide. As of 2020, the male population was topping 104 million, while that of the female was 101 million. So you then tend to wonder that why do we keep having gender inequality? Is it that we don't have enough females? Obviously, this slide doesn't suggest that. Next slide, Odion. Again, if you look closely and you try to, again, segment the gender structure of the country along age brackets, you will see that, it still looks like an even distribution around an imaginary bell curve. Obviously, I mean, when you look at it at the tip of the curve or the plot here, the male population eventually die off even sooner than the female anyway. But looking at the productive brackets where you have between the age of 25 to 50, 60, you can see that the distribution is pretty much even. So there's really no reason why we should be experiencing or even having to talk about gender inequality and the lack of the diversity as far as it's concerned. Next slide. Odion, next slide. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so one of the critical elements globally that tend to, manage our human nature and human disposition and human accountability in a whole wide range of issues is the Sustainable Development Goals that was earmarked by the United Nations. And goal 5 of these goals says that we need to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls of all ages, as it were. And the UN goes further to say that gender equality is not just a fundamental human right, but is a required foundation for peaceful, prosperous, and a sustainable world. So I'm happy that Lagos section is talking about sustainability within the context of all these discussions on gender equality and the likes of it. There has been improvements, there's been progress over the last few decades. More girls are tending to go to school now. Fewer girls have been forced into early marriage, and more women are tending to get into political positions of leadership and the likes of it. But despite all these gains, the challenges are still there, they're still real. The laws and the practices are still very, very discriminatory in many fashions. Next slide, Odion. Now, moving closer to Nigeria, right? An opinion poll that was taken in 2021, that's about exactly a year ago, March 2021, suggests that the generality of Nigerians, at least from the sample population, suggests that 61% of them says that there is no gender equality in Nigeria. And when asked the question whether or not women are given equal opportunities in men, a whole large portion of the recipients, 63% of them actually, respondents, beg your pardon, actually reacted in disagreement to that. Obviously, in the area of politics and even in family perception, they clearly disagree. But I think there's been some kind of improvement or some even distribution between those who agreed and those who disagreed as far as workplace recognition for women, as well as educational opportunities for women are concerned. But when you look at it closely, when you now start asking what are the solutions that we need to implement, as far as gender inequality, and then you'll find out that most of the respondents here are suggesting that maybe we need to have a change of policy or introduction of policy that is going to drive this. You can go on to the next slide, Odion. Yeah. So if you look at it, the cultural bias against women in Nigeria is actually real, and it's something that's still on the face, either unconsciously or consciously, as it were. There's this story. In fact, I had to blank out the picture of this honorable member of the House of Assembly who stated publicly that women are domestic workers and caregivers both for their husbands and children, and that they should not be given too many opportunities. Okay, I mean, it's amazing that in this time and age, somebody is tending to say that. And if you look at the facts of the stat on the right side of this slide, Nigeria is ranking close to the bottom of 189 countries as far as gender equality index is concerned. Next slide, Odion. Now, it's clear that when you look at literacy, amongst the girl child, when you look at the late teen years or the late teenage years, 73% of them between the age of 15 and 19, right, are, more or less educated. But once they get into their early 20s, this percentage drops significantly to 58%. And the reason is not far-fetched, because more and more of these girls are being introduced into early marriage. And the World Bank study that was done a few years ago estimates that it costs Nigeria almost $8 billion in lost earnings and productivity every year, due to the impact of not educating the girl child. And poverty is real. And in Nigeria, we say 44% of girls are married before they even turn 18. And most of these, if you dig down, you'll find out that it's mostly in communities or in areas where you have extreme poverty, and they more or less sell off their daughters, in exchange for money. Next slide, please. Still on statistics, it looks like there is a clear vendetta against women. When you look at what pervades or the fabric of our society, it's not an uncommon trend, of course, for women to be abused, either verbally, physically, or even sexually in some instances. And I remember that there was a case in Abuja a few years ago where a government agency, with the help of security authorities, stormed into a nightclub, a popular nightclub in Abuja for that matter, and they labeled all the women, every single woman, rather, that were cited, at the scene as prostitutes, and they were all arrested. And we even later found out that some of them were even assaulted while in custody. But curiously, there were men at the scene of the race, but none of them were reported, were arrested, right? And it's quite unfortunate that this is a clear case of what's happening here. That's the seat of government. Next slide, Odion. Still on statistics, when we look at political structures, our political offices, as far as elected positions are concerned, in the last election that happened just in 2019, the last general elections, almost 3,000 women ran for political office. Out of those 3,000, 57 of them were elected. This amounted to less than 4% of them. And when you now look at, the representation of women, in our decision-making and policy-making bodies, looking at the lower house, the House of Rep, the upper house, the Senate, when you look at an average of the last three republics, the 7th, 8th, and the 9th assemblies, we have less than 10% of the senators being women, which we keep wondering that. So how can there be laws that will even favor women, or policy as it were? We'll talk a little bit of that shortly. Next slide. So enough of slides, statistics. The fact remains that it's clear from the preceding slides that the gender disparities do actually exist. You know, in terms of education, we have disparities there. In political participation, like I just mentioned, the disparities are there. In employment opportunities, even our traditional institutions, you know, Obas, Emirs, OBs, and the likes of them. I don't think I've come across a woman at all. And in some instances, when women need to step into the role of a traditional ruler, you tend to hear that, oh, she's a regent or standing as a stopgap for the main king or person to come onto the throne, as it were. So I think it's something that we need to look at, because don't forget, we're talking about Nigeria, and we're quite guided by, you know, traditional and cultural sentiments. Religious institutions, the same thing. It's not very, very usual to have preachers on the pulpit or even imams as females. You know, I'm a Christian. You know, even interestingly, when you look at the history of Christianity, Jesus Christ himself, you know, had 12 disciples, and all these disciples were all men. You know, I know for sure that in that time and age, there definitely were women. But this is not an attempt to criticize that, but just to explain that some of these things might be unconscious, and it might just be practices that have evolved over several generations. So earnings as well, you will be amazed that there is a disparity in earnings. A woman occupying the same role as a man tends to be paid not as well as her male counterparts. And of course, even in poverty, so amongst the poor, the poor people say they will call the women, their fellow women that are poor, as poorer, as it were. So it's interesting the way these things are. So my last slide on the parting shot here. Go ahead, next slide, Odion. Next slide here is, this last slide is now asking the fundamental question. You know, we've had a lot of discussions, you know, even in our industry, in our own workspace and environment, that, you know, women need to break barriers, you know. Okay, they've broken the barriers, they've been asked to shatter glass ceilings, they've done that. The last, this month was the IWD day a couple of weeks ago, and we asked that, you know, we need to break the barriers. So what next? What else do they need to break to be able to overcome some of these challenges and frustrations, as it were? So on these notes, I would want to leave it here so that we have a distinguished panel of discussants to speak justice to this topic and educate us and provide some insightful perspectives. So I'll hand over to the moderator, Fayama, at this point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Debo. That is a perfect grounding to the discussion this morning. And seeing the statistics, it really shows that there is need to amplify the discussions that go on around this topic. It gives us the right segue to progress into the rest of the panel discussion. So with that, I want to welcome again all our distinguished discussants on this very sensitive topic. In all that was described from Mr. Debo's presentation, we can see that women are at the receiving end. They are mostly vulnerable to societal effects. They are the ones who get the first impact when crisis happens. They are the ones who sort of bear the burden for the rest of the population. And as such, it becomes really important for us to spotlight women and see what can be done to change the trend. All right, so on that note, I will open the floor to every person on the panel to give us your thoughts on the theme, gender diversity. Yeah, share your thoughts for like 2 to 3 minutes as you please on the theme gender diversity today for a sustainable tomorrow. And this looking at it from the Nigerian context. We've seen how abysmal the statistics show where Nigeria is today in the grand scheme of things. What do we need to do? What do we need? Where do we need to go from here? What actions do we need to take on this path to change it so that by next year, when we come to discussing this topic on women, we would have an improved statistic. So I would please like to start with Engineer Effie. Let's hear you. Give your opening remarks on the theme, please.
Thank you, Fayama. Thank you very much for that quick intro. So a big thank you to Debo as well, and everyone. Can you hear me? Just checking. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. You know, this is a virtual meeting. We need to test, be sure that the gadgets are working and Microsoft or Zoom is not failing us. So thanks a lot for the opportunity, SPE. I want to say a big thank you, Priscilla, Fayama, Mike, Odion, all the guys behind the scene who's made this possible. Is amazing. The world is opening up again. Great to be back. I'm delighted to see Alero. I haven't seen her for a while, and quite a lot of you on the call. So if I just share a few quick thoughts. I mean, for me, there's been too much talk around this issue. Sometimes get a bit frustrating, but again, like they say, dialogue continues. So for me, I think gender diversity, if I look at dimension, has been shaped over time with factors like literacy level, culture norms, beliefs, development, exposure, economic empowerment, stereotype bias, all sorts of, you know, micro inequities or nuances, which we're all familiar with. And I think that Debo did touch on a lot of that, and I can see got really emotional. And then if you look at the Nigeria context, like Debo mentioned, I looked at that on the internet as well last night preparing for this session. You know, back in 2010, I think it was like 80 million ratio men to women, we were 160. Today we're about 200 plus, and you see that almost 50% equity in terms of gender diversity. So it just shows how big the problem is. And I always say it's not from an intellectual capacity. I've worked with a lot of great women who's also part of shape my career, my life. I have 4 daughters, my wife, and all this who actually shaping. It's quite sad to see that we haven't really made a lot of progress. But on the other hand, there's been types, I would say, some bit of progress. When I look at the Nigerian context, it's a bit of a mixed bag. We've seen great progress in financial services sector where like you have top CEOs, the Sterling Bank, Access, EcoBank, you have people in really top positions, same in companies like Guinness, or material sector like Lafarge. And we've seen huge role and strides being made by women in the C-suite and board positions of those kind of organizations. And I think there's a lot to learn in terms of the wider Nigerian context within the private sector. Whereas like Debo mentioned, when you look at politics, it's really abysmally poor when you look at gender diversity. I also looked at Japan. Japan is a very strong country, great nation, but very horrible in terms of gender diversity. And one of the underlying themes is there's lack of political empowerment and economic participation or opportunity. So not being given the opportunities. And that's really one of the big issues around where we are today regarding the Nigerian context in terms of root cause of where we are. But on the other hand, most women have made it to top Nigerian companies as CEOs and chairpersons of boards, more than even some of the G20 countries, to be fair. So, and that's what I said, it's a bit of a mixed bag. So to wrap up, I think there's been lots of talk, still a lot of way to go. And I like SPE giving us this opportunity to share our thoughts, dialogue, be part of that conversation. There's still persistent gender gaps at the company leadership level, in the workforce and supply chain, which impacts women's ability to participate equally as like men in Nigeria. So overall, a great opportunity, but keen to learn and share some thoughts. Thanks. Those are my opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Engineer Effie. Indeed, you touched on a key aspect, because otherwise we would all be gloomy, but highlighting that there is a mixed bag on gender diversity from the Nigerian context immediately throws in some positives for the women who are seriously breaking the glass ceiling. So on that note, I will please invite Mrs. Alero to give her opening remarks on the topic. Let us exactly see your perspective on gender diversity.
Thank you very much, Fayoma. Really a pleasure and a delight to be here. And to the working committee, SPE, thanks so much for the platform and the opportunity to talk about something that is really so close to my heart. As I look through the room, I see that there are familiar faces. So I think I feel quite comfortable to speak from the heart in terms of my view around gender diversity. As I said, this is something really close to my heart. And I think over the years, I've watched the evolution and the conversation around gender diversity. And I think one of the things that struck me when we're talking about sustainability is that as a world, having this conversation in my mind already indicates the cost of when you do not have a gender diverse board or leadership making decisions around anything. Over the years, so when you look at the concept in itself of sustainability, sustainability speaks to longevity, it speaks to the exploitation of a resource with the entire ecosystem in consideration, so that you are not taking one at the expense of everything else. And if you begin to really consider that the physiology and the psychology of women equips us to add to conversations in a manner that ensures that it's holistic. But over the years, we have focused along a particular direction that I think has caused this imbalance and is now requiring us to revisit how we move forward. And my position is you cannot discuss sustainability going forward without that diversity central to it. Because clearly there's a need for us to think about issues differently. There's a need for us to think about solutions differently. And for that reason, you need different people around the room than you've had before. I think clearly if we look at the Nigerian story, and I must say a big thank you to Debo for that grounding presentation, because the statistics clearly speaks to the need for these conversations to continue to happen until we do have that balance in place. I think when we look at the politics clearly, but even when we look at the oil and gas sector, it's abysmal in terms of the level of participation of women across the chain. And once you begin to even talk around the table about where decisions are being made, we're still talking at cases of less than 20% across management tables. And in many cases, when you're looking at who is at the helm of the organization, you're talking of 1%. So clearly there is a need for us to do something different. And I believe that in organizations where we see that things have changed, they only change because there was a targeted and intention to change the narrative. So nothing is going to change because we talk about it. Things are only going to change because organizations see the value for it and are ready to do something about it. The whole society and the frame in which it creates means that the interventions are going to come from organizations, but even as a woman, I would say the interventions are going to have to come from us, because we're going to have to see ourselves differently from how we have probably been conditioned over the years, and we're going to have to take more responsibility for how we shape that future going forward. I think when Effie was speaking to the financial sector, you recognize that when you do give women the chance, they do it well. So we really don't need to beat ourselves up and think that we're incapable of it. We're more than capable. I keep saying two things. You know, intellect is not given by gender. God gave it to us equally, male and female. And on that basis, it means that we do have the ability to deliver equally once the enabling conditions are there. And the other thing I like to close with is that there was a reason God made us male and female, because he knows that it is in the together, it is in complementing each other that we actually unleash value, creativity, and impact. So for us to go forward, for the world to go forward, for our ecosystem to remain intact, this conversation needs to happen. at organizational levels, at national levels, and even at individual levels to ask ourselves, am I making the best of the resources that I've been endowed with in the decisions I'm making going forward? So that would be where I'll leave it for now, even as we look at more specific conversations going forward.
Wow, you have really pulled out some salient ideologies from this your opening remark, because you did highlight that the importance of equal representation in decision making cannot be underestimated, because indeed men and women were designed to have different abilities, and all that they have together needs to come together to build a sustained ecosystem. So who knows, some of the challenges we might be facing today in Nigeria and in the world globally could be because a certain gender is removed from the decision making, and the benefits that come with having them is not being harnessed. Thank you so much for that perspective. We're going to look more into it as we progress into the panel discussion. So I will now call on Mr. Debo again to please, you have done so well in giving us that grounding presentation. Let us hear your thoughts for a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Fanyama. Interesting comments from Alero as well as Effie. I think, you know, I'm being careful, you know, and again, I want to encourage everyone not to overflog this issue. You know, I mean, everybody here belongs to a WhatsApp group or the other. And I tell you, I belong to one WhatsApp group that quite a few of us here belong to. It's an SPE family group. And, you know, we bring up these issues on gender diversity and all. And it's interesting that even within an SPE community, opinions differ. But at the end of the day, you know, they differ towards overall positivity. But while trying to converge, it's important for us not to condemn, right? Because even as we advocate for what is right in terms of trying to improve diversity, trying to discourage inequality, we need to respect the fact that in as much as we need to promote or to improve the opportunities that women have within our space, whether it is at work, whether it's in education or whatever it is, those women also have male counterparts who even are exposed or are subject to varying degrees of stereotypes on their own. So it's a careful balancing act that, for me, has to border on the principles. But where we are to attain equity, we need to bring the women, you know, to the level where they deserve to be. And a whole lot of them, I'm telling you, from our own experience in the industry, right from when I was a young field engineer, and the moment I moved out of the trainee field engineer bracket, I had trainees of my own, and the best set of trainees that I've worked with in my time have been women. I don't know whether it has to do with the passion or their competitive nature or their confrontational nature to issues, but they tend to, you know, within the service spectrum, in the oil and gas industry, I must say they tend to outperform their male counterparts. And I'm not saying outperformance from the point of view of physical grit or strength or whatever it is, you know, because that is not what does the job really. But in our space, in the kind of work that we do, you know, there's a lot of cerebral, combination of cerebral and intellectual acumen that, you know, comes into play. So on that note, I just want to encourage all of us, you know, to, in as much as we're trying to make our points, make our cases, right? Not necessarily on this platform, but in our day-to-day endeavors, let us operate from the point of view of equity, you know, because as we attack the negative stereotypes, there is some other person on the other side who is also having exposure to other types of stereotypes, because diversity is not just in gender. Diversity cuts across a whole lot of aspects of our lives that has ultimate impact on sustainability. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Engineer Debo. That is very correct, because in trying to create the balance that Mrs. Alero talked about earlier, we do not want to create an imbalance in the current scenario. So it's really important, especially to put respect forward as we manage to bring back the shift to a more equitable distribution. Thank you so much for that. So I will now move on to inviting Oluwakope Adeyemi. Please spare some 3 minutes to give us your opening remarks.
All right. Thank you, Fayama, for this opportunity. Thank you, SPE and everybody for this opportunity to speak on this, something that I've lived for most of my career, and something that is really, really dear to me. For me, every time we have sessions like this, it's like, here we go again, we're having this conversation about gender diversity, and we don't seem to see the traction that we would like or we hope for. I mean, to be fair, since when I started to now, there's definitely been a big change. There's been a move, there's been improvement in terms of the number of females we see in our field or in the field in which I work, right? But I think as much as there has been some progress, a big negative has been how the story is being told, or how companies put it to their employees as to the reason why they're pushing for gender diversity, to the point where whenever things like this come up, sometimes it brings a negative reaction from our male counterparts, because they feel like by doing this, we're going to lose something. And I think in terms of what we need to do going forward, that is something that needs to be looked at properly, is how the story is told and how it's being implemented in the companies, so that it's not seen as something that would take away from men, but it's something that will build the team. And like I said, we always have loads of conversations. It's coined different ways every year, in and out. But I think we also need to start looking at the actions. How do we ensure women keep growing in a constant rate? I guess I'm looking at comparing now. Most companies, when they hire or recruit, they try to look for a 50-50 split. Now, how do we keep as much of that equity as we go up in the different levels of the business? And that is something that I think needs to be looked at in ensuring or making sure that while you're hiring 50% women, you're setting up, or you're creating, or you're providing a culture that will keep that equity as it goes higher. With women, we get married, we have kids, we go through different things that or there are different issues that we see that male counterparts might not see. We might be technically sound, but then we still have all these other issues. So looking at different ways you can ensure that you create that atmosphere that is conducive for women to grow. Aside from setting up maybe daycares or whatever else is needed, you also need to look at the minds or the mentalities of middle management, so to speak. Who are the people you're hiring that are supervising these women? Where are their mindsets? Do they have biases? Do they not? Things like this are very important in seeing women go all the way through, because if you don't have that setup, if you don't have a conducive management or conducive supervision, you will still see that as you go higher, that split that equity is reduced.
Thank you so much, Tope. I hear you say more around the organizational structure, taking into account the way the message is passed, such that it's highlighted as a benefit to the team, not one gender versus the other. Thank you so much for that perspective. So finally, I invite Engineer Tunji to please give us your opening remarks on gender diversity today?
So good morning. I believe it's still morning.
It is. Good morning.
Okay. All right. It's early where I am. It's just 6:45, but I'm really glad to be here. Just to assure you that it's me, I will just quickly put on my video for a few seconds, and then I'll let it go off. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's a very good initiative from the Section 61. So I'd like to also say thank you to all the speakers, especially Debo, who has set the tone for a very interesting exchange of ideas. I would look at it, make a statement really coming from another angle. Today in the world, we are really moving from oil and gas to, let's say it's a move from oil and gas to renewables. In all scenarios that you can read up and you can see from those who publish them, there's a need for more energy because the population of the world is growing, especially in the non-OECD countries. And these are countries that typically do not have the required per capita access to energy. And so there's a need for more energy. At the same time, there's a demand for the survival of the universe for less emissions. So this is a conundrum. This is a delicate issue, and delicate issues are normally better solved by women. This is the first point that I think we need to understand. Just in the recent past, we have seen that the countries that did better in the initial stages at controlling COVID, which was something that was unexpected, were countries that had the top people in government, their governments controlled mostly by women. So we see that there is really an opportunity here, moving from a typical oil and gas environment to a transitional environment to something that is cleaner. We see a lot of opportunity, or I personally see a lot of opportunity and scope for the promotion of gender diversity and inclusion as we go through this process. So, can you still hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, all right, okay, because my laptop was hanging. So, in all scenarios, we need more energy. What we also need to understand, even though we're SPE, is that oil, in most of the scenarios, as a commodity, is expected to plateau before 2030, so within this decade. However, gas is going to be a transition fuel, is an enabler of the transition. We are going to go into a situation where we have greener liquids and gases, radical electrification of the economies, renewables that I talked about. We are going to see the arrival of hydrogen. And then, of course, we have to think very wholesomely also about having carbon sinks. So this is either through forestation, or even so capture and storage of carbon in oil and gas activity. So through all this, we see that from my own perspective, the oil and gas industry is well structured in terms of knowledge, in terms of capacity, in terms of organizational ability. And so the oil and gas industry must play a leading role in this necessary energy transition, The skills that are available today, the organizational ability are in abundance, and we need to leverage on gender diversity. Coming back home to Nigeria, we know that overall sub-Saharan Africa, there's energy deficit. This is a reality. Bringing this nearer home, we have a projection of a significant increase in population today at about 206 million. We're expected to grow to a population of about 270 million in 2030 and 330 million by 2040. So the access to energy for this new increased population is also expected to bring unprecedented opportunities, which we can expect that the diversity and inclusion will be better represented. So looking at our industry globally, and I think this has been touched upon by Debo, it has been touched upon by Alera also. In spite of the fact that women account for 48% of the global workforce, in our traditional energy industry, oil and gas, women are only having a representation of about 22%, less than a quarter. And if you go into renewables energy, maybe a bit more, at about 30%. So in the entire universe, the oil and gas industry, as well as utilities industry, are today the least gender diverse parts of the economy in all nations of the world, not only in Nigeria, but everywhere else. In my company here in Nigeria, Total Energies, we have a ratio of 16 to 84. 16% of women, 84% of men across all our entities. In the director.
So Ogatunji, this means that we have a lot to tackle on this, because 16 to 84 ratio distribution is very imbalanced, and
very balanced.
It gives us some work and action to take of this meeting. If you permit me, please, let me use this point that you have raised and cycle back to Engineer Effie on what exactly Nigeria needs to do in this renewable energy transition pathway. Because if we look at what has come out of COP26, they want aggressive change, stop using fossil fuels, funding is being thrown into the conversation, and a lot of actions have been designed to make sure that we move immediately away from the current situation. What are your thoughts around paths for Nigeria to take, knowing fully well that we do have an energy security question to also answer today?
Thanks, Fayama. This bit is quite interesting. It's like moving away from gender diversity towards energy transition based on, I think Tunji had teed that up nicely. I think what's changing now in the world globally is, in the past, Africa wasn't really given the chance to share its own advocacy. That has changed now. You can see Africa went to Glasgow well represented with a very clear narrative around, look, there's going to be different travel paths or pathways for energy transition. Let's not fool ourselves. Over 600 million people today don't have access to grid electricity. I mean, Nigeria is a classical example. Half of our population, close to 100 million people, don't have access to very basic energy. So the advocacy we have been driving, which is very much in line with what the president also said in Glasgow, we will not go to the 2050. I think Nigeria is looking at 2060, and China has come out as well, 2060. So everyone has come out to say they will have different pathways to energy transition and sustainable tomorrow. And from a Seplat point of view, I think we've been very clear in the sense that the way we see the model playing out, which is in line with the Nigerian pathways, there's going to be a lot of funding going still into the upstream, traditional upstream business, and that cash will now use the proceeds from that cash to now fund the investment required in the renewable energy sector with natural gas as a transitioning fuel, which aligns with the federal government's gasification strategy. So we have huge potential in Nigeria around solar grid, off-grid, on-grid and off-grid, hydro, and there's a whole lot of feasibility work regarding other forms of renewable energy. We've got to be very careful. There's a whole lot of nice greenwashing and nice talk out there around gray, green, blue hydrogen and all this exotic wide range of renewable energy, which is pretty much very much at inception and a lot of technology yet to be developed. But for us in the Nigerian context, I think the focus is very clear in terms of the path. We will not go the path of Europe or America or Asia or China. We'll go through a Nigerian path. Fossil fuels is going to be a big part of our energy mix. You heard Tunji did say the huge energy poverty deficit we have today. Our view, hello? So our view is so driving that investment, but producing oil and gas in a very clean wind sense of driving down emission. So stopping flaring, for example, getting rid of methane, fugitive emissions. And then also these are, for me, highly very interesting things I see is going to stimulate high intellectual capacity. And this is where I see girls and women striving. A lot when I talk to my daughters, I tell them the same thing. There's so much you can do. I know when it comes to a lot of intellectual involving work, I see women actually way up there and getting really excited. And I think we have been able to develop very high capacity and ability for women who have distinguished themselves in a technical operational fields, like a lot of you on this call, whether it's talking who worked in deep water or for Shell or yourself, Anyama, amazing thing you've done in Schlumberger, Priscilla, all of you here, and our focus now on how you translate or carry over those sort of skills into trying to help shape the energy transition pathway looking forward with a sustainable tomorrow within the Nigerian African context. So for us is how do we hone in on those sort of skills? How do we continue to leverage? And how do you also, people like yourselves on this call, become a source of inspiration to other, girls, women, to now continue to drive that whole force for change, in my view. And that's where I see a huge part for this gender diversity playing out as we transit within the energy spectrum. So for me, that's the comment, that's Seplat, as our belief to say, yes, we believe in climate change, we believe in the need to live a better world tomorrow for our kids and grandchildren, but the path we'll go is going to be a completely different path in Nigeria compared to the Western world or the OECD. Back to you, Fanyama.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And this particular topic question was important because it needed to ground the conversation. And I like that you brought the Seplat story to the forefront. And all with what you have said and what Tunji has mentioned earlier, we need to find out if indeed this is the time for women to take the platform. So I will ask Mrs. Alero next. Do you believe that women are going to now come to the forefront of the sustainability narrative if the oil and gas industry, for all the years it has been in existence, still has abysmal statistics today? Do you really believe that a sustainable tomorrow will hold a promise for women to have gender balance? Please, you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And I think my answer is yes. I do believe that this offers a very unique and distinct opportunity. I think I couldn't have said it better than Tunji said. And I think that's why it's important to lean on the men to speak for you, because when Tunji made the statement around, sustainability in itself is up the alley for women, I notice in the conversations today, the women are very excited about the sustainable energy solutions, about the alternatives. I think when I say sustainability in that context, I look at them as alternatives. As I mentioned earlier, I think the challenge is we've over-exploited one resource and created an imbalance. And now looking at alternatives that continue to create new opportunities to rebalance over the long term. So I think the way I see it is that first and foremost, I understand the Nigerian narrative. I embrace it in terms of still a reliance on the fossils as we know it, and using that as a bedrock going forward, even as we transition. But I must say though that my advocacy is that we need to also pay a lot more attention, because what I hear in a lot of the conferences these days is, we continue to do what we're doing, and eventually, we'll use gas and then we'll transition to this in the future. But I'm saying that if I look at the gender side and I look at the interests of the women, it will be effective if we pay a bit more attention to these alternative energy solutions right now. Because even while we're still focusing on the oil and gas, there are people interested today to begin to work these alternatives. And the entry barrier is not as high, but it is still a lot of money required. So we begin to look at the pillars that we need to have in place to equip the women and anybody else. I think, in these cases, it's really, again, I don't want us to swing the other extreme of, okay, only the women are in the sustainable energy solution. No, but it's just that it is new for all of us. It's new frontiers, it's new learning. It means that for a lot of the women, you're not struggling against the tide as we're having to do in the oil and gas sector, which over the last how many decades has been dominated. And going back to the earlier conversations, you're not telling people to get out of what they're doing, but we're saying that the opportunities are opening up. And this creates a platform for us to come together and begin to invest, because I speak to a lot of women in oil and gas who are ready to invest in the new alternative energy solutions, who are ready to build capacity and capabilities in that regard. And hopefully we can see more of a gender balance if the right enablers and support is being given. So my real advocacy at the national level is that we don't get carried away with this narrative of, okay, we stay with what we know, but even at this time, we begin to provide the enabling environment in terms of the funding, in terms of the policies that allow these alternative solutions to begin to grow organically. Right now, as women, we are also the ones most affected by the energy inequity. The underserved group in the economy when it comes to energy solutions is still predominantly women. So whether you want to go micro in terms of your business solutions, you really need to begin to think about other energy sources. And I really will be looking for us to see how can we begin to advocate that this area gets the right attention. Yes, we've given ourselves a decade more than the rest of the world, but we want to pay attention to it right now because there are lots of women involved. I will just put as an aside, I'm part of the Women in Energy Network, and I'm also part of the NCDMB Sectorial Working Group. Now, when I go to the NCDMB Sectorial Working Group, our focus is on oil and gas. But when I'm in the other sectors, when we talk energy, is more embracing of all the women. And I begin to see that the more we come into oil and gas, the more the numbers dwindle. So really there is an appetite and an interest around energy, just around the traditional solutions as we've worked it. So it will be good for us to begin to shift energy, begin to provide the policies, the funding for it, and also the capability so that that area also begins to grow as we continue to exploit what we have.
Thank you so much. I like the part you brought out about funding, and we will come back to it later. But I really want to quickly go over to Mr. Debo to ask. Now, in a culturally, with the cultural backdrop we have in Nigeria, where policy for gender diversity might take forever to arrive, we pray it doesn't happen that way. What other alternatives are there for women to push forward? Like things are happening, they're breaking the ceilings here and there, but for a more scaled up diversity, what other alternatives are there for the women, since policy might take a longer time to arrive?
Yeah, I'm glad you quickly admitted that, you know, in Nigeria, there's little or not much that policy has been able to do for us, you know, let alone try to drive gender equality, as it were. You know, I've not really seen the political will in the country to drive that that much. You know, but if you look at the stats that I put on there earlier, you know, 73% of Nigerians believe that women will face discrimination in one form or the other, right? And even though I know that we are quick to say that policy has failed several initiatives as far as you know, gender diversity would go, but I would advocate for a hybrid, more like a combination of policy and non-policy efforts that need to be deployed to gain sufficient mileage and impediments to gender diversity. What I would say is that on the policy side, there needs to be policies that target established or known barriers and impediments, as it were, and then establish KPIs to be able to monitor performance. You know, it might be important enough to even have a government agency that is set up to be able to look at this, so that you have a change agent, which could be a man or a woman, doesn't matter who it is, you know, driving some of these things. Because we've had in Nigeria, the issue of this country over the last 10, 15, 20 years, we've had some mavericks, some people who, I mean, have revolutionized certain aspects of our lives that we never thought would change. So I'm sure that if we identify the right kind of change agents, backed up by policy, that person can drive the policy to realization or actualization, as it were. Now, on the non-policy side, I think a mindset change is what is critical for all of us, and we all are stakeholders in this regard. And what I will suggest is we need to consciously break the unconscious biases that come into play. And I will advocate for what I would call the ABC, you know, of trying to break these biases. First, the A stands for we need to admit that these biases do exist. You know, that is, I think, the greatest challenge that we have. Even amongst the women folks, some of them may not even realize or agree that those biases exist. They might just think it is something out of luck or out of circumstance or whatever it is. So first of all, we need to admit it. The next thing is that we need to block these biases. We need to create practices and norms where these biases don't come into the fore. For example, take a look at hiring process in our country, in most organizations, right? When somebody drops their CV, you're expected to put gender. In fact, they put sex, male, female, whatever it is, age, date of birth, and all of that. I think we need to take out some of the requirements to have all of these things there, so that, for instance, you don't need to admit your gender on a CV, so that anybody who is analyzing or trying to hire or recruit talent, when they're looking at the CV, they're not looking at the individual behind the CV. They're looking at the quality of talent that is being brought into that organization. So you take out some of those things that bring those biases into fore. Lastly, when I said ABC, the C is we need to count it. In other words, we need to measure the statistics. You really cannot improve what you don't measure. And for me, this is key for sustainability. So as much as possible, these statistics should be reviewed, you know, I mean, over time, constantly, and with everybody's efforts. And like I said, you know, combining it with policy formulation, I'm sure that it will be a very good path for us to realize some of these objectives. Thank you, Payama.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for highlighting the non-policy alternative to gender balance, breaking that bias, because it's so unconscious and ingrained in the population that it becomes difficult to even admit and identify it and admit that it is there. Now, I will come to what men can do in this conversation more proactively. But before I get to Tope, I want to quickly ask Engineer Tunji to expatiate on some of the things that Deborah highlighted. Okay, what can we do today to accelerate the advancement of gender equality at all levels, not just at the entry point now, at all levels and across the different areas that were talked about earlier. Banking is doing well. Oil and gas, we still need to have that conversation for oil and gas and series of other sectors. What can be done in a more granular form to accelerate the advancement?
Okay, thank you very much, Fayama. Thank you. I think it's a nice point for me to jump in. I almost jumped in when Debo was talking, because I agreed completely with his last point. His last point on the fact that there's a need to measure, because if you don't measure, you will not know. You will really not know where you stand. So when you talk about measurement, while I was preparing for this, I asked the executive director of SPE to send me the statistics of a number of women that we have in the Nigerian Council compared to the population as SPE members. And to my biggest surprise and shock, UD mentioned to me that this is something that is not available, that you have demographics that cover age, technical discipline, region, and the organization that the person belongs, but there is no clear mention of gender. So that is something that I think we should improve. On the council, however, we also note that over the years, so 5 years ago, so speaking about 2018, thereabouts, we had 11% of the council membership being women. Today we have 28. It is still not enough, but some progress has been made, and I think we can continue in this way. So in terms of what we can do, I personally believe that women, as somebody has mentioned it earlier, I believe it was Alero, that women, or maybe it was Effie, that have the intellectual capacity, they have what it takes to dominate the landscape. And I really mean that. So for me, there needs to be advocacy at all levels, advocacy in the government, in financial institutions, donors, and people who support our industry to push through enabling policies that will increase the visibility and inclusion of women, especially, like I said earlier, new investments in energy projects linked to the future of the energy landscape, which is the transition that we've been talking about. So there's also a need for comprehensive support to measure that we improve access to the financial, technical, and capacity building measures that will allow women to participate in the sector. And then there's also a need for some level of affirmative action, not only at the entry level. Today I mentioned something, the statistics in my company. So in our next recruitment, we have targeted a minimum target of 40% and a stretch target of up to 80% of our new recruitments to be women. So this was a decision that was taken by the company at the ExCom level, and this is a way of boosting and improving this statistics. And not only at the entry level, top level, board level recruitments also need to be made once in a while, and women who are capable of transferring the skills that they have in one industry or in one area of specialization can actually be brought into leadership roles in the energy space. So we talk about people from banking and so on, and commercial areas where we have real serious leadership from women. They can be brought into this energy space. And these are some of the things that I think we should do. So coming back to make a last point on one of the things that Debo said, he mentioned that maybe we should leave out gender, but if we leave out gender, how do we measure it's a kind of, I mean, I understand what he's saying, and I really would probably make an example. I don't know if it's appropriate, but I think you will understand this example. There are today what you call gender neutral toilets in public places in the Western world. So a lady goes in and wants to use the facility, and just before she gets to use it, two men enter the space. So one of the men, man one, goes ahead and does his own business with the lady present and goes out. Man B looks at the situation and says, I will excuse you, madam. You can use the facility and then I'll come back. So the lady ends up the experience saying that man B has respected her by giving her the opportunity to be a lady. When she recounts this to her mom at home, her mom says, no, I believe it's man A that respected you because he treated you as an equal. So these are challenges that we have to know where to put the cursor in terms of respecting inclusion, and then when does it become patronizing? So we really need to be careful about this, and it's a discussion that is open. I really don't have any firm position on it, but I believe that measurement of the statistics is quite important. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. And that example you gave really brings the diversity of thoughts around it, because it really varies. It makes it difficult to measure, but at the same time, it's important that it's measured to know when we are making progress. So I see Deborah's hand is up. Mr. Deborah, would you want to still say something, or do we proceed?
I just wanted to respond quickly to Tunji on the point he made about his concern about taking out a data entry such as gender from your CV, for instance. You know, I opined that we need to block, as part of blocking some of these stereotypes away from making it obvious. You know, I agree with you that taking it out might make it difficult for you to generate statistics related to gender. However, what I think is that that statistic should be a lag indicator and not a lead indicator. In other words, after all said and done, right? Because at the end of the day, you are going to interview candidates, you're going to shortlist, you're going to hire eventually. So you can now, as a lag indicator, retroactively or retrospectively, you can generate those statistics from what you know already. But making it a lead indicator, right, unfortunately, in our climes, puts the female population, you know, at disadvantage. Because I know, and I'm telling you, I'm a part of, I know of recruitment processes where, you know, even at the board level of certain organizations in this country, in this industry, the moment they see a candidate as a woman, they say, well, maybe it will not work for us. So that is the point I'm trying to make, Tunji. I hope you get the point now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Deb, on that point. So just listening to this conversation alone, I'm just intrigued, because we cannot have a talk on gender balance without having the men on the same table, because this is what we are working against, right? A gender that has been underserved, now trying to play in the space of the gender that has been at the forefront of industries. So I will come back now to Tope. We cannot have this conversation without the men. Do you think they are doing enough? And what are those things you would like to see men do for a sustainable tomorrow if we're going to have gender equality today?
Are we doing enough? Is enough being done? My answer would be no. But I think a big reason the answer is no. I think a lot of traditions and culture play into it. I'll give an example. I was passed up on a few roles because, oh, it won't allow her to get married, or if we take her for this, how is she going to manage getting married or having children or whatever? So a lot of culture plays into these decisions. I credit a lot of what I've achieved to my supervisors I had when I started off. They were both Dutch, and they weren't, and I guess because of their culture, they weren't bogged down by possible marriage or any of those typical things that our culture seems to put on women. And they just treated me like every other engineer. And so when things were bad, so there wasn't, oh, I'm treating her like a girl. I was treated like, you know, like one of the guys, so to speak, in how I was developed and how I was trained. So a change in the psyche needs to happen. A change in the mentality needs to happen. Men need to see bringing women to the forefront, not just as a good to have because we have all the studies, but they also have to feel it inside of them that it's important for these women to be brought up higher. So, and I think, funny enough, I don't think I don't think it's more women in leadership that would help the women, that will help the journey. I feel like it is more in the men. And the reason why I say it is more on the men's side is because well, as of right now, it's a man's world. It's still a man's world. And there's more, when a man pushes a woman forward, there's more to it. There's more value put on it versus a woman putting a woman forward. Still, for now, it's seen as a woman supporting women, or she's just doing it because she wants to bring her sister up or something. But when a man backs up a woman, there is more value put on it. And I've seen that play out quite a number of times. So it's important for us it's important for the men to get with the program, but the way we push the story, the way we tell the story is very, very important. Because like I said, still, even till today, and you can see in some of the conversations, once you bring up gender diversity, a lot of people have their back up and they see it as a way that is going to take away from what the men have. But while it might come off as that, it's a transition, it's a journey. We change, there's always going to be a difficult transition. So there might be some times where it seems like it's unfair towards the men, but in the end, the end result is for us to get the gender diversity that we say will be beneficial to us as companies, beneficial to us as nations, and a people altogether. So yeah, no, there isn't enough being done. Yes, we need to do a lot more.
Okay, I still want to hear some more details about this, because this is where apparently the crux lies. In what way can we even prepare these men? Because this conversation, we have it everywhere, in pockets, in businesses, in meetings. What exactly do we want the men to do? They too are probably asking that same question. What do we want them to do to support? Okay, I see Alero's hand is up. She wants to talk about that. So let me quickly move to Alero before coming back. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And I think Topper nailed it in terms of the fact that we need the men a lot more. And I think the key thing is, if I listen to the narrative, I listen to the conversation we've had today, I see men here who are able to articulate and advocate the story. When I say it, I come across as aggressive. When they say it, it's okay. And so what I need is for them to say more of what they know and what they feel and what they experience in their homes. It's for them to step up and take that place as advocates. Because otherwise it's as if I have an agenda, but I believe ultimately we're having these conversations because it is what is in the best interest of all of us. We can either be big men of small things, or we can create ecosystems that are large enough, prosperous enough to unleash the potential of the nation. And so what I would ask of them is speak up more, create more opportunities for these dialogues. I honestly believe that, and I always repeat it, nobody wakes up in the morning and say, look, I'm just going to destroy that woman, or I'm just going to put somebody down. It is not the intention. So it is dealing with the unconsciousness of how we have been schooled over time and learning how do I undo who I am today. So I think investing a lot more in the conversations, in the training, in the language, in opening yourself up to just ask questions. How do you feel about A? When Tope was talking about decisions being made for you because I think I'm protecting you. It's my role as a man to take care of you. You also don't then understand how you limit the possibilities for that person because of the protection. When we're talking about issues of, making gender neutral positions, it's okay at the point of entry. But if we look in the industry over the years, the point of entry is not the problem. Women are getting into the oil and gas sector. The key question is what happens to them over the years. Many are either filtering into other things or they're just stagnated. So we don't want that protection. We want to be engaged. We want you to ask the questions, understand the journey, and speak up whenever you see something that you already intuitively know that this cannot be right in terms of the overall journey we're on.
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much, Mrs. Alero. In fact, from when yourself and Tope were speaking about this, I immediately had a brainwave that perhaps for the next gender diversity event, we should be having training sessions or awareness sessions on men and what they can contribute to gender diversity, moving away from a focus on women. Thank you so much for that input. So I will invite now Mr. Effiong. Tope, let me please invite Mr. Effiong to answer this very pertinent question coming from a male perspective. How can D&I be a priority, both for companies, for men, when there are other major concerns happening around, like market risks, tightening budgets, competitive industry landscape, and we know that for men, it's mostly about power. How can they shift focus from those heavy ticket items and begin to cater to things like gender diversity? Please, let's hear your thoughts.
Thanks a lot. I think the first remark before I respond to the question is, these sessions are always very emotive and a lot of emotions come in and all that, but I think my comment will be there's never really a right or wrong answer, and there's always different views and the views based on how people see things and the lens at which you're looking at things. And that's why there's a new concept some of you may have seen called psychological safety, which is being driven by Harvard Business School. There's never a view. There are multiple views and there's never a right or wrong. I think what we should be promoting is actually being open-minded and be listening to all the views, in my view. So coming to the point around the question you just, I think for me, just a few very more pragmatic steps. This needs to be top priority. It's got to be set right at the top of the organization. Like they say, things need to come from the tone. The tone has to come from the top. Top means the board of the organization and the management. There's going to be passion and ownership at all levels. I talk about give that nice funnel model where we have a lot of people coming in, at the higher level, recruitment level, you have clear gender parity, 50-50. But as you go through that career funnel process, then people just filter out, and which is part of the problem. So that's why this passion and ownership of driving the same sort of vision and goal has to be at all levels. It doesn't have to just be at the board level, intermediate level, supervisory level. There's always this concept of impermeable shield as you go down the organization where things don't actually go down. I think that for me is one area where we can change it. The other one is around everything starts with business strategy. So your strategy has got to be very clear in terms of D&I being part of your people development strategy, and also when you move to execution, how does your D&I strategy fit into the people's space. That's one key area. Investment choices people make must reflect D&I centricity. Your business plan, short, medium, long term, must be very clear around what are you doing, what's the set target. And I like TJ's point around what you can measure, you cannot improve. So all that's going to go through that hard side. And if I look at the hard side of every business, like, there's always a hard and a soft side. Your processes, system, tools, the working environment, it's got to be very strong. One thing we suffered over the years, for example, those days you go to an FPSO or drilling rig or even FLB, field logistics, accommodation, they're not really conducive. They're not designed to have gender diversity. So women tend to lose out. So a lot of all that hard stuff has to be pretty much tied along this line. And then on the soft side, your scorecard, your reward system, your bonus, the culture, all that must have their nice centricity in how you drive that. So we need active leadership sponsoring D&I in organization, the change narrative, the culture bit. We're all going to promote diversity. If you look at it, to be honest, there's a research that was published not too long ago that the FTSE 100 boardroom has had a positive and significant effect on the financial performance of firms. So firms where there's more diversity, more women, have seen to outperform all indicators in the market, whether you're looking at EBITDA or you're looking at TSR, total shareholder return in terms of share price appreciation. We've seen that companies with 3 or more female directors have significantly outperformed. So I think for me, it's a no-brainer. And it's just how we now drive that intensity and what we do going forward and less of a talk. Those are my kind of thoughts around how companies can actually drive this space, Fayama.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And it's positive, it's encouraging, and we will indeed hold the companies to these. Thank you very much. So we'll be going into some of the audience questions as we round up. We are almost, we're done with trashing out a lot of this point. I want to ask Mrs. Alero, you mentioned about women going more now into renewable energy through the WAN conversations. Is there finance available? Because there's a lot of funding, about $100 billion is being set aside for the energy transition and all. Is that funding accessible for women if today they're interested in taking up those spaces?
So I think that continues to be a challenge. The funding levels, the levels at which the fundings become available is also based on what you've done in the past. Even the cost of, just being able to get your foot in the door, the usual registration, who do you know? Those are obstacles that the women are really struggling with right now. And so when even though there's a lot of money available, you still need to provide like entry-level support to even get people on the map. And I think that really is one of the areas in which we would be advocating a lot more strongly, that whether more in terms of grants and support hand-holding in terms of capability development, there is a lot of help that is required. So what I see is a lot of enthusiasm, there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of capabilities around it intellectually, but there's a lot more hand-holding that is required in the entrepreneurship space, just in terms of building that capability and also providing the initial grants that people need to set up themselves. So those are conversations that we're already having. I believe even towards the end of early 2021, a group of us came together, did a training on renewable energy. So we are keen to do it, but we still need the entry levels, the barriers still need to be lowered significantly for us to be able to get on the table. And I always speak about things in 3 folds. It's always about the funding, which is where is the money coming from, is the capabilities, the skills to do it, the skills to run businesses, the skills to function within organizations, and in the context of what the trends are, and it's always about the opportunities. We need to find those opportunities, small and big, that fit into the funnel of the women that are available. Because every time when we talk about diversity and women, we use one brush, but all women are not the same. I think the other day we were having a meeting, they all fit in different categories. So even sometimes we're having conversations that speak to the top category of women, but they're just a tiny handful. For us to keep that funnel going, we need to have interventions, funding solutions, capability solutions along the funnel that ensures that we can get others through. And I think the second and third tier is where we are really struggling right now, about ensuring that the levels, the barrier levels are sufficiently low enough for these women to be able to play.
Thank you so much. All women are not the same. That phrase is so profound, because when you try to help one set, there's another set that has a completely different type of needs. So I'll quickly come to Tope on this one, and it relates to one of the questions we have in the chat box. For the women who want to succeed and they want to take charge, they want to own their success, what are those things they should actually do? What should women do to come out of the bracket or the group that is not so successful to the ones that we can count as breaking, shattering glass ceilings? What do the women need to do?
That's a big question. If I'm thinking in the field we're in oil and gas, one of the most important things, or one of the biggest pieces of advice I was given, was to build my technical CV. Now, a major thing, and I think we had this conversation during the lunch with the younger engineers, is that most of the time when a man is put up for a job, they believe him that he's competent, but a woman has to prove that she's competent. And a big way for you to show your competence is obviously to build your technical CV. So in terms of your foundation, your technical CV you need to do everything you can to get that as much as possible. The second part is you're going to have to get out of the comfort zone. You're going to have to speak up more. You're going to have to go against a lot of the traits that we have as women. Women are not good at tooting their own horn. You need to come out of your way to show that, yes, I'm competent, or to say that, yes, I can do this, and speak up for yourself. It's a tough journey, but it's something that if you need to fight through it for you to be able to move forward in the environment we find ourselves. So you need to be able to speak up. You need to go against yourself, show what you've done, speak about your achievements, let people see what you've done. An example is, it was one of my male colleagues. I was like, Tope is like, you're the first person to do this. For me, I was just working. I was just going to keep on my work. I wasn't going to do anything or say anything about it. It didn't even click. But men are better at this. And so we need to learn from the way men talk about their achievements. But like I said, or like has been said, you can do everything you can. Without the conducive environment, you're going to be limited. And that's why you have phrases around breaking the bias and breaking the glass ceilings, because these actually do exist, but you need to step out of your way for it to be able to get through. So aside from, you need to ensure that you're competent more than anything else. That's the most important thing. Ensure that you're competent in whatever it is that you want to strive in or grow in. And then on the other part is the external part, where we need to ensure that we create conducive environments for women to grow in. And aside from the parts about women and children and that aspect, is also for CEOs, for management to look at their middle management and see where their minds are, and ensure that that unconscious bias that is there is not affecting the balance that you're looking for in your companies, ensuring that you have that conducive environment for women.
Thank you, Tope. Women do need to take some responsibility to identify their own, to own their own success. And that is a message that I hope is being taken out of here. So the first question, this particular question you addressed came from Ngozi. I will now move on to Galvin's question, and this is going to be addressed to Mr. Debo. We have seen that women are breaking the glass ceiling. but there is still that cultural bias that sees that the ones that are successful today do not thrive as much in Nigeria, like the Dora Akunyilis, the WTO chief. They do better when they are outside. What are your recommendations for women to navigate past the existing bias so they can do their best work, irrespective of the environment? Mr. Debo, please.
Yeah, very interesting question. I think, you know, there is, I don't want us to get fixated that we're not making progress or that the situation is very bad or is very dire. I think I know Tsuji mentioned that our industry is statistically, we're not there yet, you know, globally, right? But I would say that there is a fair amount of progress. And I would say we should take a cue from SPE. Now, if you look at SPE Nigeria, right, 5 sections, okay? From what last time I checked, we have 4 of those sections are actually chaired by women in this current year, right? Which I think is remarkable progress. It's something that would never have been thought of just a few years ago, right? And there's actually a remote possibility that we could actually get to a time in the next 1 or 2 years where all our sections are going to be chaired by women, all 5 of them. Now, with the Dora's Akinyi of this world, for blessed memory, the lady at the World Trade Organization, you know, these are mavericks that have, you know, gone outside of the shores of Nigeria. But I tell you, within Nigeria, Effie made reference to the financial sector, where we have some quality CEOs running the affairs of some of the top banks that we have in play. Now, it's little baby steps that we need to get there, right? I don't think a big bang mechanism is going to get us over the curve to where we want to be. So I will say that patience is key, right? And in any area of human endeavor, it is when you have the foundational elements solid, then you can, you know, you can peak, and then those shining stars will start coming out. So I think we're doing the right thing by having conversations like this around this subject. When I look at the attendees in this, the 37 participants in this webinar, and I can see there's a lot of interest there. There are a lot of women that are here, and a few of them I know. And when I look at them, right, some of them are actually very, very young. They're below the young professionals level in SPE. But I tell you, what I see is potential. And I was speaking with an SPE colleague a few weeks ago that, look, in the next 5-10 years, right, we're going to see an industry where some of these young women are going to become the decision makers that are probably not just permanent secretaries, I'm talking about ministers of the industry and petroleum resources. They're going to be upper echelons of NNPC, possibly a GMD candidate. And it is not impossible to conceive that possibility. So please, we need to just exercise some patience. And I believe that with time, all this groundwork we're doing is going to, you know, evolve, you know, into actual reality. And we're going to see those shining and bright stars coming out into play. And I can assure you there are a whole lot of them, you know, that there are within our industry. And I want to believe that the way and manner we're going about it, that's a piece of information that Sunji gave to us, that our industry is not doing well globally in terms of female representation. I think Nigeria is probably one of those countries that are going to turn the curve on that data. Thank you very much, Fayema.
Well, thank you so much. I really want to thank every one of our discussants today. This has been a rich conversation. Personally, I have picked some action items out of the call, and it's just been awesome. Thank you so, so much. So as we round up, I will give 1 minute or maybe less to us, everyone on your personal mandates. Okay, Galvin, I see your hand is up. I had thought I addressed the question, but it's still up. So please take the floor and let's hear your question. Galvin?
Okay, thank you so much, Madam Fayema, and thank you to SPE for this good point. Please confirm you can hear me, Ma.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so shortly, I just want to make just few points and make this address. So like I say, I'm very interested in diversity and inclusion. And one important point I want to raise is the fact that there is no diversity in gender. So the gender we have is just the male and the female. And for that reason, there are several factors around diversity, which is just internal factors, external factors, organizational factors, and the worldview. So for internal factors, that is where we have the race, age, the gender, natural origin, and your cultural diversity. So this brings it to that point where we understand that this particular factor, which is the internal factor, nobody has any control over them. Where you are born into, how old you are, you don't have any, your ethnicity, you don't have any control over them. But the key part of this, I think, would be a point where organizations, and I think we have key decision makers here who can drive this point. We need to create an environment, just like we have created HSC in our industry in the oil and gas, a diversity and inclusion department that would constantly remind us about these stereotypes and these biases that are existing in our workplace. So once we have those departments that keep reminding us, sensitizing us to know that various policies and processes that will make us do away with those stereotypes and those inequalities. This has to do with the female and the male gender, because one key point here from everything we've discussed is if we try to just keep trying to put the number equal or 50-50, maybe we'll do away with competence. Maybe we'll just look at, okay, we just want to get the number to be 50 female, 50 male, and we begin to lose competence and it all. But having that diversity.
Galvin, thank you so much. I see it's not exactly a question, more like a recommendation. So I really thank you for the perspective on this institutionalizing the message around diversity amongst companies. And indeed, I'm sure that we will take that on board, especially it cuts across the entire spectrum of employees everywhere we are, to create that sensitization, even in meetings, to start up with a diversity moment. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your time, and our attendees. I want to give our panelists less than a minute to share your personal mandate on what you will do to improve gender diversity today for a sustainable tomorrow. So
okay, let me chime in. I think thanks a lot. I mean, great session. For me, I think it's a no-brainer. We'll have to walk this space. I've always been blown away when I see how gender diversity has really helped. The Sarah Week 2 weeks ago, I saw this woman, Jennifer Granholm, maybe you know her, two-time governor of Michigan. I was blown away at the way she spoke about this whole energy transition, the crisis in Ukraine and all that. So for me, in terms of what I'm doing, I'm looking at role models like that. On the board, we have people like Aruma Ote, Emma Fitzgerald, Natalie Delapalme, and we're working together to say I want to drive gender diversity in the SEPLAT context. So whole space around shaping the strategy, driving improvement around the culture, D&I agenda on my leadership team meeting, like you mentioned, like we do safety movement, now we have ESG movement, we're now putting in a gender diversity movement. And also, I think overall, for us as men, like you had, to really become a force for change in terms of actualizing this, in my view, laudable ambition. So it's not just talk and all the frustration. Empower women in workplace, give every woman a chance, avoid gender bias, support women, mentor women. And luckily, we just started what they call the SEPLAT Awesome Women Network, which I think is all part of what we're very, and we've got targets on how we want to drive this change in SEPLAT. So it's not just talk, it's actually results and business outcome. Thank you very much, Fireman.
Thank you so much. SEPLAT is such an example to many of our other companies. Okay, so Mrs. Alero, please, let's hear your mandate for gender diversity.
I think my commitment with regards to gender diversity is twofold, is to advocate and is to encourage. Advocate on the basis of make the case, continue to look for the opportunities and encourage both the he for she's, as I call them, all the men who are already on board and those who are in the pipeline, help us see the case for why this is important. And also for the women is to change our belief about ourselves, our possibilities, and the value and impact that we bring to the table. It is not about just getting and taking a seat. It is knowing that that seat you're given is in trust and that you deliver value and impact to the overall for it. So I advocate, sometimes very strongly, but I also encourage and partner on all levels to ensure, I think the point Galvin made is that it's an overall ecosystem. We must ensure it all comes together and delivers the right value and impact.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mr. Debo?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll just write on the back of what Alero said. She wants to advocate. I'm not going to say, I'm not a preacher, so I'm not going to preach, but I will testify, right? Testify from the point of view of talking about it, speaking about it, and highlighting success stories, amongst the women, because there's quite a lot of them. And on top of that, I think I will make a conscious effort now, because I carry out what I call unconscious mentoring. I mentor people all the time, but I think I'm going to focus a lot more energy now in trying to mentor the women folks. So in kind of a split, maybe a 60-40 split, to try and see as many more women, rise through the ranks of our immediate workspace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Debo. So Tope, let us hear what you say on this.
Okay. In terms of what I'm going to be doing, I mean, funny enough, we do quite a lot of it together. So that is good. I think, like we said, and I think you had asked something that SPE can do, and I guess that would be something around unconscious bias. A lot of people don't know that they are biased until it's put in front of them. So maybe we can do sessions on unconscious bias with people to sensitize them to the biases they have. But in terms of what I'm doing to help this journey, as you know, I'm open to talk to anybody about my experience and what my journey has been like, to encourage younger female engineers that you can do it. If I could do it, you can do it. Mentoring, whenever I'm asked. So there's a lady in Malaysia that I talk to every month. She doesn't have as many female engineers ahead of her. So we talk and we go over development, life, and all things like that. So all we can do, and I guess that's what I can do at the level I am, is speak up for women when the opportunity comes, for mentor whoever wants it, and share my experience and an open book as much as possible.
Okay, excellent. So I will also let Mr. Tunji give us his personal commitments to gender diversity before we round up.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Fayama. So it's been an interesting afternoon. For me, I think it's quite easy. I would emphasize that we make communication a keystone. So I would definitely commit to communicate on where we are. So like Debo explained, the lagging indicators, so that we understand. I would also invest a lot in building competence. So it's a deliberate action in building competence. And of course, to ensure that the women have the confidence to step into the senior roles. So that's what I would, so it's communication, competence, and confidence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And for me, I would continue to speak up when I identify that there is a case of bias, and try to break the bias everywhere I can. With that, I will hand over to Priscilla, thanking all our distinguished panelists. This has been a very rich conversation. The recording will be made live to people who want to follow up later on the call. So thank you once again. We really appreciate your time with us. Priscilla, over to you.
Thank you so much. What a session. Please, we would like to take a group photograph, if you don't mind. Turn on your videos, please, before I hand over to the section director. Please turn on your video so we can quickly take a group photograph. John, please help us.
Yes, sorry, good morning, everyone. Sorry.
Done.
Oh, sorry. I was on mute. I have clicked. Thank you, everybody. I have clicked, and yes, you can turn off your videos now. Thank you very much.
We'll get a copy of this lovely picture.
Yes, so we'll send
Sure,
it across.
sure.
Thank you, everyone. Please, I will now hand over to Michael, our section director. Michael, over to you, please.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much, Priscilla. Please confirm you hear me.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Priscilla. Thank you, Fayama, for the very explosive session. I think we've had over 90 minutes of listening to our very outstanding resource persons, sharing deep insights with us today on this very topical theme. I would, on behalf of Lagos section, deeply appreciate all our resource persons on the call today for spending quality time out of their very busy schedules to enlighten us today on the theme, Gender Diversity Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. They really painted the Nigerian context. So special thanks to Mr. Mitope Adeyemi, Mr. Tunji Akinwumi, Madam Alero Nosede, Mr. Debo Fagbami, and my very own operations director, Mr. Effiong Okun. We cannot appreciate you all enough for all your continued contributions to SPE in particular, and to the industry at large. We thank you immensely, and we believe that we can always count on your continuous support and partnership with other events in the near future. Let me also appreciate the team that put these very rewarding events together. Kudos to you all for your continued volunteerism. And then lastly, this event could not have been a success without you, our remarkable audience and SPE professionals. We thank you for keeping a date with us today. Let me also quickly try to add to some of the messages we've heard today. I watched a short video recently that really resonated with me, and the message was essentially that there is also a need to pay some good attention to the boy child, grooming him with the relevant orientation such that he gets to value, respect, and appreciate our girl child. And then growing up, as he grows up into becoming a man, those barriers or biases around gender balance would also get dealt with, or would have also been dealt with at a very early stage. And this, of course, improves the opportunity for more inclusive and diverse society. So this is just to add to some of the context that has been painted earlier. Thank you very much. And okay, rightly, moving on quickly, I would go into the announcements to cover for the activities that Lagos section will be having in the near future. So the students chapters video contest activity put together for students also to commemorate this month of our Women's Day. It will be coming up on the 29th of March. We also have the Project Master Professional Mastermind Series run by SPE Lagos that's scheduled for the 9th of April. And we have an in-person event coming up on the 16th of May, SPE Distinguished Lecturer Series. We hope you keep a date with us. 2 other activities around Petroleum Engineering Technical Series, and then the SPE Lagos Mentoring Series. As soon as we get clarity on those dates, they will be duly communicated. Next slide, Odion. Okay, on the national level, we have the Oloibri lecture and energy forum event coming up, that of 2022 coming up next week, 31st of March in Abuja. It will be addressing the theme, global energy transition, implications on future investments in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. We hope you keep a date with us and endeavor to register if you haven't. The last slide, Odion. Okay. You can always connect with Lagos section, keep in touch with us via all the channels that are highlighted below. And more importantly, would like you to reach out to the contacts you see here, Odion, Uju, and Ohaji, with regards to membership renewal. And for those of us who are not members, reach out to them also so that you can endeavor to join. Thank you very much for your time with us today. And we look forward to connecting with you again in subsequent events. Do enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. Back to you, Priscilla.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. So, bye, everyone.